For the first minute of this story, stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't a romanticized battlefield anecdote or a recycled survival myth. It's one of the few field innovations from World War I that quietly outperformed expectations, kept men alive, prevented frostbite in trenches colder than a walk-in freezer, and is still fully usable today with nothing more than basic materials. Long before modern space heaters and thermal gear, soldiers created a heating system that refused to freeze, refused to quit, and required no electricity whatsoever. It is the kind of historical technique that turns a simple flame into a steady, all-night heat source. And if you're the type of person who values practical knowledge, the kind that outlives trends and technology, then this is one of the most reliable fieldcraft lessons you can add to your skill set. The trick I'm talking about is the slow-burn trench heater system built around clay, embers, airflow control, and a deceptively simple fuel. The trench's own coal dust, charcoal scraps, and compressed biomass. It was not glamorous, but in conditions where the cold killed as efficiently as artillery, it worked, night after night, when everything else froze solid. One of the most reliable heating tools in World War I trenches was a small clay or thin-walled metal brazier. The soldiers discovered that when they packed crushed charcoal, leftover coal dust, or even dried dung into a tight container and controlled the airflow from the bottom, it produced a long, slow, almost windproof burn. The clay retained heat and prevented thermal shock, while the restricted oxygen caused the fuel to smoulder rather than flare. A smouldering fire was the secret to surviving trench nights that dipped well below freezing. This wasn't a campfire. Campfires blow out, flare up, or die fast in wet conditions. A brazier or trench heater created a radiating heat that stayed consistent for hours. Many accounts describe these little heaters glowing red long after midnight, while the air around them froze, canteens solid. To apply this today, you only need a ceramic pot or steel can with holes near the base, something to place it on to elevate it, and slow burn fuel. Once lit and buried under ash, the fire becomes a heat battery. What kept trench heaters alive wasn't big logs or dramatic flames. It was, well, fuel density and the soldiers' ability to choke the air so the fire smouldered. Coal dust mixed with a bit of water and shaped into patties produced hours of heat. Charcoal mixed with clay did the same. Even dried manure, fully dehydrated, gave off a steady warmth. For a modern survivalist, this same principle applies when you want dependable night heat without constant tending. You can repurpose sawdust mixed with wax, biomass briquettes from lawn or crop waste, or compressed charcoal fines. Light the top, let a crust form, and once the oxygen drops, the burn becomes slow and controlled. If you camp in cold weather or work outdoors, this type of heater gives you a stable, radiant heat source that doesn't need babysitting. Airflow was everything. Soldiers carved tiny apertures in the base of their heater using mud, stones, or bent tin to reduce oxygen flow. When the air was restricted to a narrow channel, the fuel stopped flaming and turned to embers. Today, you can replicate this by creating a small firebox with adjustable vents. A metal can with 2 pencil-sized holes at the bottom and a partially covered top is enough. If you want even more control, place a stone or tile over half of the opening to regulate draft. This transforms a handful of fuel into hours of dependable heat, just like it did in trench dugouts more than a century ago. A surprising advantage of the World War I heater was its dry, radiant heat that allowed soldiers to thaw socks, warm rations, and reduce moisture inside small dugouts. Moisture was the enemy. It stiffened boots, froze rifles, and caused trench foot. Radiant heat fixed that by warming surfaces directly. You can still use this today in off-grid cabins or workshops. A small radiant heater will dry gloves in minutes, keep condensation off tools, and maintain a survivable microclimate in an enclosed space. In survival conditions, you place the heater near the ground, position stones around it to absorb and radiate heat, and let the slow burn process handle the rest. What made these heaters perfect for cramped trench shelters was their low flame, height, and controlled smoulder. Soldiers positioned them near ventilation slots or under small chimneys cut into the trench wall. The low oxygen requirement reduced smoke output, and the clay walls of the container prevented heat spikes that could ignite gear. If you were to recreate this in a modern emergency shelter, you would position your heater as close as possible to a low draft, such as a small window crack or a vent hole. You'd elevate it on stones to keep it stable and place sand or gravel beneath it to prevent embers from spreading. Start with a clay pot or metal tin. Add 2 small air holes at the base. Pack your chosen fuel tightly and light just the top layer. Once it burns for a minute or 2, cover part of the opening to limit oxygen. Let the fuel crust over, then set it on a stone or brick base. Within minutes, you'll have a steady ember core that puts off hours of warmth. This heater works in winter camps, power outages, barns, garages, and even during early morning farm work when the hands freeze before the sun rises. If you found this guide useful, don't forget to subscribe and share. Knowledge like this doesn't expire. The soldiers who invented these heaters didn't do it for comfort. They did it to survive. If you'd like more deep-dive historical breakdowns like this one, stories where the practical science behind old techniques still matters today, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, and share this guide with a fellow history buff.